Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the ongoing tech apocalypse here at Hyde Cottage. We will see what we will see. I am still casting around for all sorts of solutions to what only a week ago was not a problem. I'm casting around for solutions on how to make reliable, simple videos to upload to YouTube. So far, there have been lots of problems. I've remade, restarted, cussed out lots of discarded videos this week, far more this week than I've done this year. So we'll have to hope that this video, for instance, works well. I'm trying different methods with different devices for every other video today. We'll have to see which ones of them work and which ones of them don't. For this one, I thought we'd do a mail haul, which is very risky if you've got recording problems, but the show must go on. I got a bunch of mail today, including a huge box. But first, there was also the periodical. There was the New Republic. The second death of Milton Friedman. The Economist died in 2006, and now his pernicious and reactionary ideas are finally dead too. Which gives you a sense, a feeling of what this whole issue was like. The New Republic, of course, is a politically skewed magazine, and even so, this was intensely political. Shrilly, shriekishly political, almost from start to finish. Patricia Lockwood's novel, No One Is Talking About This, or internet novel, got a book review that was quite good, but aside from that, and maybe there's an article in here about erectile dysfunction drugs and a scam that involves them. Aside from those two things, this was just politics from beginning to end, and I don't usually like that. Ordinarily, in magazines like this, political magazines like this, there is a blood-brain barrier between the front of the book and the back of the book. The back of the book, so-called, is the traditional name for the book reviews that happen after you're done with the political stuff. And traditionally, the unspoken idea, except in the most zealous periodicals, is that you will be done with politics once you get to the back of the book. It's the reason why in magazines like the New Republic or the Week or whatever, I have tended to just read the back of the book, so as not to get all worked up by stuff I can't do anything about. But this, oh my. First of all, Zachary Carter writes the long piece on Friedmanomics. It was angry, it was eloquent, and it certainly made Milton Friedman and his school sound like the biggest bunch of heels in the world. But it was written with such foam flecking from the mouth and eyes that I immediately started wondering, okay, how fair is this? And the same thing is true for almost everything else that was in here. I want to give you just one example. We'll turn to page 7. Before they get to any of the long articles, the editors of the New Republic do a whole bunch of shorter things. This one is by Jake Biddle, and it's called Critical Failure: How a Filmmaker Created the Frenzy Over Critical Race Theory. And there is the drawing is of the guy involved, Christopher Rufo, tearing up the 1619 Project. So you know already that this thing is going to be partisan in the extreme, and whether the partisanship is on the right side of history or the wrong side of history, I really don't want to read it. I really don't want to read a screed that is not just giving me an op-ed, but that is lying to me, for good or ill, for a good end or a bad end. I want to give you an example of that. Let's see here. Rufo has had an unusual career. He came up not through the traditional conservative blogosphere, but as a man-about-town documentarian who made a film about roughing it in Mongolia that the New York Times called Self-Involved, and a PBS documentary about inner-city poverty. Last year, after the Floyd protest, he learned that the city of Seattle was hosting racial sensitivity trainings where white employees were urged to practice, quote, self-talk that affirms their complicity in racism, close quote. Supported by Patreon and more recently by a Manhattan Institute fellowship, Rufo started collecting tips from other, quote, whistleblowers about funky language in diversity trainings from Cupertino, California, where third graders were asked to rank themselves according to privilege, all the way to New York City, where a principal urged parents to be, quote, white traitors and advocate for, quote, white abolition. And in parentheses, we're told Rufo did not answer questions about whether he has other affiliations or funding sources. Okay, so he didn't answer your questions about his other funding sources. You've listed 2 of them, Patreon and the Manhattan Institute Fellowship. And he didn't answer questions about any of those others. But what was the rest of it? you can see what I'm talking about here, how loaded this thing is. We are told that what we have heard described to us is called funky language in diversity training. Okay, but white abolition is not funky language. Okay, telling your employees, your white employees, that they have to call themselves racist is not funky language. We're not talking about just surface level semantics. And Jake Biddle seems to think that he can slip that right by you. And he goes on. It gets more pronounced. The past year has produced a remarkable amount of hand-wringing and self-flagellation among middle-class white people, not all of it productive. But Rufo has framed these isolated instances as identitarian malpropism as evidence of an overarching Marxist plot to replace categories of bourgeoisie and proletariat with identitarian categories of black and white. Did you catch that? That's making it even more explicit. Rufo has framed these isolated instances of identitarian malpropism. So in other words, once again, a malpropism, funky language, and isolated instances. Well, if you can list 3 of them from 3 different parts of the country, they're not isolated instances anymore, are they? If they're happening in the same 6-month period, in the same institutional and social setting, along the same lines, then they're not isolated instances anymore, and they're certainly not malpropisms. And so no matter where you stand on the question of critical race theory, or for or against, or no matter what camp you sit in terms of people who might abuse it on one end of the political spectrum or the other, you kind of know that Jake Biddle is lying to you. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. That is one of the reasons why I like to flip right to the back of the book. But the back of the book was all politics too. So then this particular issue of New Republic was a little bit of a disappointment for me. And I'll have to see even the book ads. Look at the book ads on the back. A field guide to white supremacy. How white men won the culture war. American Islamophobia. Good Lord. One way or another, I'm going to have to get in touch. Most of you will not remember a booktuber named David Murphy. He's become something of an urban legend. He used to make videos, unbelievably nerdy videos about politics and economics mainly. And I'll have to see if he has read this article. Him I would trust to tell me, who is this Milton Friedman? What is his intellectual history? And how noxious is it? But when the cover of the New Republic says the Economist died in 2006 and now his pernicious and reactionary ideas are finally dead too, that raises red flags. I immediately don't trust that. If the subtitle of your headline article and the cover of your magazine is Milton Friedman died in 2006 and aren't we glad of it, then I'll have to see. I won't take anything as gospel about Friedmanomics until David Murphy tells me so. But we also have Mail, which we can hope is a lot less political. And there may be magazines today that don't get off such a bad start. I don't like it when periodicals don't respect the 100-year-old blood-brain barrier between the front of the book and the back of the book. Traditionally speaking, the back of the book, even in political magazines, is where you go to get away from politics. I'd like it if people would respect that. But anyway, let's see if we can let's see what we have here. Okay. All right, this next one is from Chelsea Green. I've read a couple of their books and really like them. I never want to be a cheerleader for any one publisher, but this imprint I really, really like. It's Nature Books. And that's what this one is. This is Rebugging the Planet. The remarkable things that insects and other invertebrates do and why we need to love them more. And it actually has a little sticky note from the publicist on the book that is very nice. That is very nice. Actually, let's see what the publicist has to say. This is a passionate how-to to bringing bugs back from the edge of extinction. Okay, well, let's see what we have here. So, rebugging the planet. It's summer for a lot of my audience right now, so a lot of you aren't going to like the idea of rebugging the planet. You're probably getting enough bugs as it is. I took Frida Bean, my little miniature schnauzer, the last cool day that we had here. I took her to a foresty part of the park, of a parkland that's near here, and we were swarmed with mosquitoes, swarmed with them, to the point where we had to turn back. And because I was worried that she was going to get bitten everywhere. That tough skin of hers and that tough, wiry fur, is only so much protection. Sooner or later, if it's a swarm of mosquitoes, sooner or later they're going to target the eyes and the nose. But one way or another, let's see what case is to be made here. Imagine a world with no insects and invertebrates. No flowers, no trees, no crops, no food, no clean water. Enormous piles of waste blighting our landscapes. This is the reality of a world without bugs. This vision is perilously close to where we are now. With over 40% of insect species at risk of extinction and a third more endangered, our planet is headed toward Insectageddon, a catastrophic loss of life that would have global ramifications. In this book, environmental campaigner Vicky Hurd passionately shows us how insects and invertebrates are the cornerstone of our ecosystems and demonstrates how we must turn the tide on this dramatic bug decline. Okay, well, I said I don't want to be a fan, for any one publisher, but Chelsea Green has almost never failed to hit this extremely winning, extremely nerdy tone that makes me love their books. But the ultimate, the ultimate positive for them is not the subject matter, but the editorial team, because the books are always good. The editorial team, the editorial vision, the subject matter will only take you so far. Your editors have to know what they're doing. They have to know who to pick and how to make these books shine, and they always do. So rebugging the planet is the next thing from them. Okay, and I should probably tell you when this comes out, yes? This comes out as a paperback original in late September. So now we'll move on to this next one, then we get to the big box. I'll tell you the story about the big box. This one feels like a finished copy. We shall see. What have we got here? Oh, no, it's not a finished copy. It's an advanced copy, again for September. What have we got here? Okay, don't need that. And I don't need that. I do need this, though. All right, so this comes out in September. This is Wildland, The Making of America's Fury by Evan Osnos. Sounds pretty ominous, doesn't it? Evan Osnos moved to Washington, D.C. in 2013 after a decade away from the United States, first as the Beijing bureau chief at the Chicago Tribune, and then as the China correspondent for the New Yorker. While abroad, he often found himself making a case for America, urging the citizens of Egypt, Iraq, or China to trust that even though America had made grave mistakes throughout its history, it aspired to some foundational moral commitments: the rule of law, the power of truth, the right of equal opportunity for all. But when he returned to the United States, he found each of these principles under assault. In search of an explanation for the crisis that reached its unsettling crescendo in 2020, a year of pandemic, civil unrest, and political turmoil, and also an armed insurrection. There's political unrest is when you're waving placards in front of City Hall. There was an armed insurrection to overthrow the United States government. They're not the same thing. They're not on a spectrum. Anyway, he focused on three places he knew firsthand: Greenwich, Connecticut, Clarksburg, West Virginia, and Chicago, Illinois. What a trio. Reported over the course of 6 years, Wildland follows ordinary individuals as they navigate the varied landscapes of 21st century America. Through their powerful, often poignant stories, the author traces the sources of America's political dissolution. A dramatic, prescient examination of seismic changes in American politics and culture, Wildland is the story of a crucible, a period bounded by two shocks to America's psyche, two assaults on the country's sense of itself: the attacks of September 11th in 2001 and the storming of the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Following the lives of everyday Americans in 3 cities and across 2 decades, Osnos illuminates the country in a startling light, revealing how we lost the moral confidence to see ourselves as larger than the sum of our parts. Okay, well, that is pub sheet speak. That is not the book, right? We've learned that for over years at this channel. This does sound incredibly intriguing, and we have to remember that every word that I just read was written by a publicist for the pub sheet. It might have been approved by the author. In some isolated cases, it's written by the author, but it isn't the author's book. It is just the sell sheet. That's all. I have huge problems with that last bit that I read you. Huge problems. There is no spectrum. The September 11th attacks were orchestrated and masterminded and conducted by enemies of America, by people who wanted America destroyed, foreign enemies of America. who wanted to deal a mortal blow to the financial nerve center of Manhattan. The armed insurrection on January 6, 2021 was orchestrated and urged on by the sitting president of the United States, by one person who is an American, who could long since, on just the laws of Washington, D.C., where the crime took place, could long since have been arraigned, convicted, and shot for treason. They are totally different things. The armed insurrection to overthrow the United States government and install Donald Trump as an unelected dictator for life was urged on by Donald Trump, the individual person, Donald Trump, who was president of the United States and used that authority to retard official responses to the chaos that he had unleashed. He was hoping that if he waited long enough, that if he refused to give a green light long enough, enough of his enemies would be executed on Capitol Hill so that he would stay president. In other words, it was not an example of America losing the moral confidence to see ourselves as larger than the sum of our parts. It was high treason by the most treasonous individual in American history. It was intentional, discreet, and, conveniently enough, videotaped high treason by one person who should have been arrested, arraigned, convicted, and executed against a brick wall. So we'll have to see. Again, that was the pub sheet. That was not the book. So we'll have to see what the author does. It sounds to me like the author has the strength of his convictions. So this could be revelatory. It could be really, really good. It's a long way off. I won't be reading it in the summer, so I will have to wait and see. But that brings us to the box. It's a huge box, too big for me to show on camera, I think. It's this thing. It's huge. And I know what this is already. I know that it doesn't have one huge book in it. It doesn't have one array from one publisher. Instead, this is from Vermont, from small town Vermont. Those of you who aren't following the soap opera of this channel might not know that Frida and I went up to Mark Richardson's house, his 190-year-old house, in small town Vermont, for a 2-week vacation. We spent 2 weeks up there, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great deal of fun. And I knew ahead of time that we were going to be there for a while, that it wasn't just going to be a weekend. So I emailed a bunch of publicists for books that I had pending for work to send the books there. I gave them his address. With his permission, I gave them his address and had the book sent there. And I only realized after I was up there what a mistake that was. That it was only a tiny handful of books that I needed for work while I was up there. It was something I could easily have found a way to do without or worked around. But I knew that there was a chance that if I did that, once you give a publisher a new mailing address where they can expect to find a critic, they might keep sending books to that address. And I think this proves it, because more books have shown up there than I requested. And that's what this is. This box is just entirely full of mail. So let's go through this and see what we have. This is just mail that accumulated up there at the house. Let's see here. Let's get all the paperwork out. The bean is waking up. That's not good. Oh, okay. The first one is something. It's a double. We've seen it before. I know exactly who to send the double to. This is by Christopher Leahy, and it is Birdpedia, a compendium of bird lore with an ingrained naked hardcover there and feathers for end papers. This is just an illustrated little book of birds, their behavior, some of their oddities, some of their more popular species. Wonderful, wonderful thing. If you are a bird book completist, I happen to know one of those, then you're definitely going to want it. But it's a double for me, so we can move straight on to this next one. Let's see what this next one is. Hardcover, Witness for the Dead. It's by Catherine Addison, and the cover says it's in the world of the Goblin Emperor, which I kind of like. So is that what this is? Is this pastiche fiction? I tore off one piece of the two sheet cell sheet here because I don't need it. It's extra, and I wanted to sort of waft it across the room, and it won't go because there's an increased breeze coming through the window, so that the cold front that has been predicted is definitely filtering in here. It just hung in air. So what have we got here? Let's see here. This comes out in late June. When the young half-goblin emperor Maya sought to learn who had killed his father and half-brothers in the Goblin Emperor, he turned to a prelate of Euless and a witness for the dead, Thara Selahar. Now Selahar seeks a quiet life serving the common people in the city of Amalo, far from the court, but his skills lead him into a morass of treachery, murder, and injustice. Addison took the world by storm in her brilliant and sensitive characterizations in The Goblin Emperor, and she continues to immerse readers in the lives of her characters in this standalone sequel. Oh, so that explains the wording on the cover, in the world of The Goblin Emperor. So this is very much not The Goblin Emperor Book 2. Okay, that is clearly what the author is trying to avoid. This is a story set in that world, but not a direct sequel. Interesting. All right, so let's move on here. What is this next one? Another finished copy. Oh, great, fantastic. Okay, this is. I think we may have seen this already. I don't have a pub sheet for it, but this is the finished copy of Lawrence Wright's Plague Year, America in the Time of COVID-19. We have the reflecting pool of the Washington Monument there, and this is his nonfiction account of the early months of COVID-19 and successes and failures in recognizing what it was and how to deal with it and all that sort of thing. This is very literally a first draft of the history of COVID-19. One of the biggest and most important events that we all share, that we will share in our lifetimes. The importance of it, I don't think, can be overstated. The size of it, I don't think, can be overstated, especially since so many of us are still in it. It's still ongoing, which is a problem that I have with this book. But Lawrence Wright, last year, wrote a book called The End of October that was a novel about what would happen if a novel virus struck the world, and how prepared would the world be, how fast would everybody have to learn words like are nots or quarantine. At the End of October was freakishly prescient in a way that happens once in a century. There wasn't, some of you actually pointed this out to me, there was a novel more than a century ago about a luxury liner that struck an iceberg and sank in the North Atlantic, that was the nearest example, unbelievably prescient, of right down to the details of the Titanic. And The End of October was that again. It was freakish to read. It was also pretty effective. And this was effective too. It's just that it's difficult to know what to think about a history of COVID when COVID is still going on. But anyway, very glad to have a finished copy. Let's see what this next one is. Another finished copy. Okay, great. This next one looks like a novel. It must be. It's a novel. It's by Gabriel Krause, and it's called Who They Was. So there's got to be a reason why there's a grammatical error in the title. Who They Was by Gabriel Krause is an electrifying autobiographical debut that was longlisted for the Booker Prize in 2020 and called by Douglas Stewart, the author of Shuggie Bain, in The Guardian, a wild ride from the very first page, an astonishing telling of a young man's search for belonging. Gabriel Krause came of age among the high-rises and back streets of South Kilburn. He was not an observer of the periphery of violence. He was personally involved in gangs, drugs, guns, stabbing, and robbery, all while completing an English degree at Queen Mary's University. Who They Was, again, the title has a grammatical error. Maybe that reflects the speech patterns of the author in the book. It comes directly from that experience, and as such, it is confronting, exhilarating, morally complex, and utterly unique. Okay, but the Booker Prize judges called this a novel. It is clearly not a novel. So I'm confused on a number of points here. There's a grammatical error in the title, and this is also obviously autobiography. This is obviously the auto-fiction phase of the 21st century. This is clearly just the auto part with no fiction part. And I don't know what that's supposed to mean, right? Is that meant to critic-proof this? If it's a novel, then it has to be a good novel. And there is no yardstick of a good novel that says, well, it accurately portrays what happened to me day by day in the 2000s. That is not a yardstick for a good novel. That might be a yardstick for the beginning of an autobiography. But if you're calling this a novel, it has to be dramatically effective. It has to have dramatic work going on. Your life won't do that, obviously, or we wouldn't have two different genres. Let's see here. The unforgettable narrator of this debut goes by two names in his two worlds. At university, he's Gabriel, a seemingly ordinary partying student learning about morality from a distance. But in his life outside the classroom, he's Snoops, S-N-O-O-P-Z, a member of London's gangs. Navigating these sides of himself, dealing with loving but inattentive parents at the same time as treacherous friends and looming threat of prison, he's forced to come to terms with who he really is and the life he's chosen for himself. Okay, well, if this were autobiography, I would say it is certainly lining up to be a perfect example of the genre in the 21st century, where you are the hero of your own story, you have never done anything wrong, and the only thing that has ever been an obstacle to you has been the treachery and duplicity of everyone around you. Not you. Everyone around you has let you down. You are a victim, and so you are a hero. And you see that in here, and dealing with loving but inattentive parents, so his parents are the villains, and also treacherous friends. Did you have any loyal friends? Were you a loyal friend yourself? It's the whole world that's wrong, not me. That might as well be the motto of the 21st century, and this is sounding a lot like that. Of course, I don't know how that reflects on the fiction part of this thing that is being called a novel. And I don't, there's about the author, there's a little paragraph about the author at the bottom, but do I really need to read it? We've just read the author's life. This is the author's life. So, this comes out, when does this come out? Do we have a date for this? No. That's odd. That's an odd omission. It's for immediate release. Maybe this is out already. I don't see a date on the pub sheet, and I dread the kind of critical reaction I'm going to see to this thing. I just dread that I am. Shots have been fired just in that sell sheet that critics know that they cannot criticize this. And if a critic gets a book and is told, you know, go on to do your 800 words, but make sure you praise this thing, or we'll be dragged on social media as racist, then what's the use of reading what comes out of that? What's the use of reading something that isn't an assessment of how effective this is? And, you know, if this is an autobiography of the author, and it sounds like it's a point-by-point, mimeographed autobiography of the author, then that's a way to judge how effective it is. If it's a novel, it certainly doesn't sound like a novel. It doesn't sound like the author bothered to invent anything. Then there'll be other ways to judge, to assess how effective it is. We shall see. We shall see. I will check its date and probably read it this weekend. But we're getting on here. We're moving along. It won't all be rants, I hope. Let's see what this next one is. Oh my! Oh goodness gracious! All right. Well, this clearly belongs to someone else in Ireland, not to me. This is by Mary Wellesley, and this is The Gilded Page: The Secret Lives of Medieval Manuscripts. Jason Harrigan at Black Sheep Books will want a copy of this book. He'll know more about it than I do. This is a breathtaking journey into the hidden history of medieval manuscripts. Medieval manuscripts can tell us much about power and art, knowledge and beauty. Many have survived because of an author's status. Part of why we have so much of Chaucer's writing, for example, is because he was a London-based government official first and a poet second. Other works by less influential have narrowly avoided ruin, like the Book of Illiterate Marjorie Kemp, found in a closet, the cover nibbled on by mice. Scholar Mary Wellesley recounts the origins of these remarkable manuscripts, surfacing the important roles played by women and ordinary people, the grinders, binders, and scribes in their creation and survival. Okay, let's hope Mary Wellesley is a former research assistant at the British Library. Let's hope that she doesn't engage in the barbarism that you just heard of using surfacing in that way. Dead bodies surface. That is the use of the verb. Surfacing otherwise as some sort of stupid business speak substitute for spotlighting or highlighting is noxious, obnoxious, awful. So we'll have to hope that Mary Wellesley doesn't do that sort of thing. But one way or another, this comes out in, what have we got here? October? Plenty of time, I think, for me to pack this in an envelope and send it off to Ireland. I think that Jason is our antiquarian book scholar. He's probably going to want this more than I have. And I'm going to get the finished copy, so there's no reason why he can't have the advanced copy. Or vice versa. Maybe he wants a pretty finished copy for his library, and I'll just keep the advanced copy. And then we have this last one, and then we're done with this monstrous mail haul. This is a huge box full of mail. This would have been parceled out over many videos. No idea if this video will work. No idea if it will upload. No idea about any of that. Those things are not, I don't take them for granted anymore. They could happen or they could not. So let's see what this next one is. Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. Okay, fantastic. This is, we saw this already. This is a finished copy of Frank McDonough's The Hitler Years, Triumph. This is the two volume. It's going to be a two-set work. This volume is the first one, Triumph, 1933 to 1939. And then, you know, the second volume will be what happens when you vote in an authoritarian, racist, sexist, fascist, lying moron. You end up with a country in ruins. You end up with literally in ruins, with streets piled with ruined buildings. You end up, if your grandmother is still alive, she is drinking rainwater out of a puddle in a ditch. That's the end game if you, as a society, elect a racist, sexist, fascist, lying moron who tells you that he wants to make Germany great again. If you do that, you might get greatness for a few years. Those are the years of this book. But the end result is always the same, and that is ruin. Not metaphorical, but literal ruin. Dogs in the streets, collapsed buildings, destroyed bridges. That is the end result. Anyway, I thought we were going to get away from politics. This was really good. This was a really, really energetic thing. I read the advance copy, and I'm very happy to have the finished one. One of the things that's noteworthy about this that we noticed with the advance copy is how many illustrations it has. It is just, can I do this? Can I do a special effect? It is loaded with illustrations. It's not just a little island of them in the middle. It's loaded with them throughout the book, and that really enhanced the reading experience. So McDonough does a fine job. This would be an engaging book even without any pictures. So very nice to have a finished copy of it. All right, so that is the mail, a mega mail haul from Vermont. Very nice. So we have Hitler, the Hitler Years. This is Triumph. So this is volume 1, 1933 to 1939. Then we have The Gilded Page by Mary Wellesley, about medieval manuscripts. And I love them. I absolutely love reading them. I read a lot of books about them, but they belong to Jason more than to me. Then we have Who They Was by Gabriel Krause, which sounds like Gabriel Krause's autobiography that he's just calling a novel because novels sell better, which would mean that not only is there a grammatical error in the title, but that also the labeling of the book is just a genetic level lie. We shall see. It's probably out now, so I have all the justification in the world to get to it right away. Then The Plague Year by Lawrence Wright, about 2020, sort of first draft of history type thing. Witness for the Dead by Catherine Addison, a book in the world of her breakout hit The Goblin Emperor, but not a sequel, not book 2 in a series. Then we have Birdpedia by Christopher Leahy. Lovely little thing about a lovely little keepsake about birds for the bird fanatic on your list. The Wildland, The Making of America's Fury by Evan Osnos, coming out in September. Something I'm going to be hard pressed to resist the temptation to read this right away. And Rebugging the Planet by Vicky Hurd, about how bugs are really important, and she's probably going to go the whole nerdish level. I mean, the book is about how important bugs are to our ecology, to our chain of food and whatnot. But if I read my science geek correctly, she's also going to say they're cool. That they're really fascinating when you get to know them. I'd be willing to bet every Chelsea Green author that I have read has started out even-keeled and balanced, saying, well, for ecological, for economic, for socioeconomic reasons, but then around chapter 4 or 5, they just lose it. They start squealing geekishly about how much they love the thing they're talking about. I'm not criticizing. We would be a much poorer world without them, but known to do it myself. But I'm going to give her 3 chapters until she loses her composure and starts just squealing about how cute bugs are. But anyway, that is the mail plus the New Republic. And I'm going to wrap this up and see if it uploads. Pray to whatever gods may be that this uploads. I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.